Unfortunately, I can't figure out how to get this menu to just show the speaker instead of all 10 people.
I think not a lot.
Well, one of the screens is the speaker, so that's okay.
So. I don't know exactly how to get this. Okay, I can get rid of this one.
You can do that individually.
Wait, we lost it up above.
What you lost? What
The screen, the slides.
Yeah, yeah. That'll come back if I go like this.
So if you do full screen, though, does that get rid of everybody? Like so that you can't see everybody?
So it's on full screen now, that one,
okay.
But I can get rid of everybody.
Oh no, I didn't know what you were. If that's what you're trying to do.
What I'm trying to do is just show the podium there instead of everybody else.
Well,
so
David,
not show the podium, but then they can't see the speaker. So I think that's what I'm going to do.
And are you advancing the slides for me?
Yeah. Just say when. Okay. So.
David, the Zoom people can go full screen on the speaker if they just double tap. That gives them the full screen of the podium.
I just wanted to make sure that I was checking in with him so that everything was okay. Are the slides okay? I'm going to do the intro. Did you get my response?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I did get your response. Okay. So
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
Give a little intro.
Here we go. Get rid of these guys. Okay.
Good thing we have David because
there we go.
We wouldn't be doing any of this.
So Ken, you're not going to be able to see the speaker, but that's okay. We don't want to see you and Henry.
No, but I can still see the speaker.
Nothing personal.
On your camera, right?
Okay, so we're ready to go, I think.
Yeah, okay.
What's coming in? 30. Yeah, I kind of want to talk to you about your horses.
Are you a horse person?
I am a horse person. I can't say proudly right now that I have horses, but I had them throughout my life. Yeah, and that was actually my career in large animal medicine at Falmouth University. So, it's really cool.
They're amazing animals. They're, ranch horses.
Yeah.
So they see a cow and
yeah.
We're ready.
All right.
Yes.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming out on this beautiful Falmouth, Cape Cod, New England day. And thank you for being interested in solar power. Our organization, the Falmouth Climate Action Network, is putting this on with the help of the library, very graciously enabling us to use this room. And so I just want to give you a little bit of background on our organization, our group, as well as some background on our guest speaker, Megan Amsler. Okay, so FalCAN was established back in 2019 by a group of Falmouth residents, for all Falmouth residents, with a very, I would say, impassioned desire to want to sort of elevate everyone's understanding about the climate crisis that we're in and what we can do, because a lot of times we look at it and we think there's nothing we can do, but there's really a lot that you can do. And by you coming out here today for this webinar, this workshop, shows that you're interested. So thank you for that. So our work is to initiate and collaborate in activities that will bring our community to take response to this emergency. And we do that through education, sharing best practices, and advocacy of impactful policies. To that note, we're happy to say that we were instrumental in bringing the concept of a sustainability director to Falmouth. You're probably aware of it through town meeting. And there is going to be a vote coming up for that this April. There is also another very important article, Article 15, which has to do with enabling offshore wind companies to be able to do soil testing. And we hope that if you have any questions about that you can bring them to one of our colleagues, which is Rosemary Carey here in the front, okay? So we recognize that we are in a climate emergency, and the town declared this emergency in 2020. And our mission is to really try to take our little part of the world to reduce carbon emissions. So that's a little bit of our background, and if you're interested in joining us, talk to either Rosemary Carey, myself, or David, okay? Let me now introduce our guest speaker, which is Megan Amsler. Since 2001, she has been the executive director of Self-Reliance. This is a woman-led nonprofit organization that simplifies complex energy concepts to educate, inspire, and empower people to take action. As a systems thinker, she has been involved with facilitating clean energy systems, building science best practices, energy efficiency, and conservation for residences, businesses, NGOs, and municipalities. She got the first grant in the Commonwealth to provide solar incentives in 2002 and established Barnstable County as a DOE Million Solar Roof Partnership in 2003. Megan is very involved in workforce training in the clean energy sector. She collaborated with Mass Maritime Academy to establish hands-on world-class technical, health, and safety training for the offshore renewable energy industry in North America, and is a global wind organization instructor there. She has served on various steering committees and boards ranging from affordable housing to technical certification of wind technology. She is the founding member of Falmouth's Energy Committee, and she has a passion for teaching and has spent time since the mid-90s teaching about energy systems. Megan was raised on an organic farm and now owns a small farm in Hatchville where she has heritage-bred quarter horses, large vegetable and fruit gardens, and raises grass-fed animal protein. She's actively working to decarbonize her home with heat pumps, solar hot water, a large PV array, and an electric vehicle. So I'd like you to welcome Megan Amsler, please.
Can I take this off the, thank you. Good morning. It's nice to see you all today on this pretty pestilent day. I'm really excited to talk to you about solar. This is definitely a technology that is near and dear to my heart. I think it is a relatively low lift for lots of people in terms of the fact that it doesn't require a ton of maintenance and relatively easy to install compared to some of the things that we were just talking about geothermal. You know, in the scheme of decarbonization and the technologies that you can use to decarbonize, PV is a pretty much of a great, easy slam dunk when it comes to getting you started on that. How many of you all, when you opened up your recent Eversource bill, had a little bit of a gasp? Yeah, so we have, over the course of many years, been paying exorbitant, some of the highest, usually in the top 4 of the nation, highest electricity rates. And that's always been really compelling for people to think about installing solar and actually take action on that. But I will say that these most recent rate increases make it even more palatable to do that. So David, you want to go to the next slide? Oh, sure, that would be great, thanks. So just a little bit about Self-Reliance. We are, as Lynn said, we're a women-led energy nonprofit. I've been there since early in 2001. We do a lot of consulting on workforce, solar, offshore wind, microgrids, and I do a lot of education. So like any of you know kids that are in the high school range and are interested in learning about offshore wind, we're running a summer camp again this year at Mass Maritime. It's a sleepaway camp. Kids get paid to come. It's pretty awesome. Next slide. So just a little thing about, you know, this is the climate emergency. Lynn mentioned this. This is literally stuff that keeps me up at night, brings me to tears. we need to take action. We needed to take action 30 years ago. I have some folks from my school, when I went to high school, and here in the audience, and I remember when Jack Betterly got up in front of Morning Reports and told us that the Earth had exceeded its carrying capacity. And I will never forget that, because it really made me think. And it really was sort of instrumental in making me realize that my life was going to be dedicated to taking action to make sure that we could sustain our life on this planet. So think about the Paris Climate Accord and all the things that we can do, and the fact that we have laws in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that actually say we have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and it's incumbent upon all of us to do that. Next slide, please. This is from the Brattle Group study, which some folks may have looked at when it comes to offshore wind transmission, but I just think that this bar chart here is incredibly impactful because it shows you that we need to have a lot of solar in order for us to meet the climate goals of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Next slide. People always want to know, I spend a lot of time talking to folks about this, like, where do I start? What's the best way for me to approach decarbonization? And this I thought was a cool little chart just to help you understand that there are lots of places in our home, right, where you can take action, and it can be incremental changes. And under the Inflation Reduction Act, there are a ton of forthcoming incentives to help with things like heat pump dryers, heat pumps for heating and cooling, induction cooking, and all of that sort of thing. And that's leveraging the existing and forthcoming programs that will be coming out of the Healy-Driscoll administration. So that's pretty exciting stuff. We have really good EV charging incentives here, but then there will be some federal incentives as well. And I have some stuff in my slides to talk about that. But I encourage you all to sort of look around your house and think about where are the things that you know are sort of aging out. I would never advocate for people to spend money on something and then replace it right away, right? If you have an old something that's on its way out, or you would like it to be on its way out, these are things where you would start to prioritize and sort of line up what the incentives are. And I'm always happy to talk to people about that. I spend a lot of time looking at solar proposals and walking through, like, well, where do you think I should start? And it's a very personal experience. So how do you pick what the best and most low-hanging fruit for you is? Next slide. This is just from the Union of Concerned Scientists, a smattering of where our emissions come from, right? A lot of people don't realize that this one, that I'm not going to talk about, is massive. And if you ever have a chance, you have a few minutes on your hand, you want to watch a little online video that is fabulous about telling us about the stuff that you buy. It's called The Story of Stuff. And she gives you some astonishing statistics around the things we don't need to impress people we don't like with money we don't have. But think about, home heating and cooling, other energy usage, and transportation. Right now, with electrification of our transportation sector, we can kind of look at these three pieces of this pie. And also think about food, right? We have, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting about Douglas Tallamay. What's the book that he just wrote?
Nature's Best Hope.
Thank you. Nature's Best Hope. And how we can change our green lawns that are covered in pesticides and nitrogen-rich fertilizers that run off into our aquatic ecosystems. And how can we change that? How can we grow some food there? And I don't know about you guys, but I have arugula and other things that are still growing in my cold frames because we've had such a crazy mild winter. So that means I don't have to buy lettuce that's flown 3,000 miles across the country. Next slide. So obviously today you're here to learn about solar, also known as photovoltaics. And I'm going to dig into that. And I'm going to show you lots of pictures. If people have questions, please raise your hand and stop me, and we can talk a little bit about what you see, or if you have questions about what I'm saying. I'm going to show you lots of different examples because I think it's super important that people understand it's not just a roof-mounted technology, right? There's lots of different ways to accomplish this. And here's a perfect example. My colleague over on the vineyard, we were partners in the first Solar to Market initiative back in 2002. This is a house that is clearly, not a great roof, and also from a historical perspective, they didn't want to throw something up on there. So ground-mounted systems, we're definitely big advocates of that, and so helping people think outside the box, if you will. And I know I hear from a lot of people who have had solar installers come to them, and they're like, I don't understand. We could do solar in the yard or something like that, but the companies are often like, nope, we just want to look at the roof. Just show us the roof. And again, I think for me, the juxtaposition of solar and our coastal ecosystems, if you think about the burning of fossil fuel and the disruption of the nitrogen cycle and how that impacts our coastal ecosystems is really, really important and very near and dear to me. All right, next slide. This is not the most recent format of our electrical bill, but I decided to just show this one because of the fact that it's clearer than what we have now. When you open up your Eversource bill, there is now a little bar chart on the second page that tells you month by month the number of kilowatt hours, right, kWh, that you consume. And that's part of, that's what drives the amount of, ultimately on your bill, the total thing that you pay. But when we're talking about solar, we want to know, this is a 13-month snapshot, so I always recommend that folks look at, like, was this more representative of a November that we had, or was this one that's only 356? And also looking to see from a usage pattern, what's going on, right? Because our behavior is a huge indicator and drives all of these numbers. And so in order to figure out sort of where you're at from a system size, we want to know what those numbers mean from a size perspective. I hear a lot of people say, like, oh, my electric bill's $300. That means nothing to me. I want to know what is the kilowatt hour consumption, because as we know, the electricity bills go up, the rates go up. Then we have all these other charges, right? Energy conservation, renewable energy, transmission. Transition, just for all of you who know, and are maybe sitting on, like, should I actually cut back on my grid power and try to generate my own? This is bad debt from the utility. So I don't know of any other industry where they make the customer pay for their bad debt, but that's on your line. That's one of the things that you pay. Distribution, and then a customer service, which is no longer $3.73. It's over $7. Next slide. These are also things that people typically have on their mind when we talk about PV is, well, I still have an electric bill. Am I going to be off the grid? And the answer to, will I still have an electric bill? The answer is yes. How much will it cost? That can be wildly dependent on who you go with or who you talk to about giving you some proposals. How much do you need? That again is based on what you're currently consuming. And then as well, are you thinking about putting in heat pumps in the future? Are you thinking about an electric vehicle? Do you have some heat pumps? All of those kinds of things will really help understand what you need. Payback, we'll talk a little bit about that. Maintenance, these things are pretty low maintenance. They don't have any moving parts, which is super exciting. And they have a fabulous warranty. I can really not point to another piece of equipment or an appliance, as I like to think of them as appliances, that has a 25-year warranty. I know my toaster, my refrigerator, all of those things that provide services to me in my home do not have a warranty like solar. So thinking about what are your energy goals, those are really personal, right? And things to kind of think about as you're moving forward in this process. Next slide. Can you click on this? This is just a short little video that talks about how PV works. If we're gonna, for anybody who's
Okay.
Can you put the cursor on the?
Yeah, it's. Oh yeah.
Click on that one.
Okay, what's it say?
Yes.
So, did anything happen? I didn't.
Or not.
Okay.
It doesn't allow us to do that.
All right, we all know that the sun's energy creates
Okay,
heat
great.
and light, but it can also be converted to make electricity, and lots of it. One technology is called solar photovoltaics, or PV for short. You've probably seen PV panels around for years.
Sorry, I'm going to try to get it
but
over.
recent advancements have greatly improved their efficiency and electrical output. Enough energy from the sun hits the Earth every hour to power the planet for an entire year. Here's how it works. You see, sunlight is made up of tiny packets of energy called photons. These photons radiate out from the sun, and about 93 million miles later, they collide with a semiconductor on a solar panel here on Earth. It all happens at the speed of light. Take a closer look, and you can see the panel is made up of several individual cells, each with a positive and a negative layer, which create an electric field. It works something like a battery. So the photons strike the cell, and their energy frees some electrons in the semiconductor material. The electrons create an electric current, which is harnessed by wires connected to the positive and negative sides of the cell. The electricity created is multiplied by the number of cells in each panel, the number of panels in each solar array. Combined, a solar array can make a lot of electricity for your home or business. This rooftop solar array powers this home, and the array on top of this warehouse creates enough electricity for about 1,000 homes. Okay, there are some obvious advantages to solar PV technology. It produces clean energy. It has no emissions, no moving parts. It doesn't make any noise, and it doesn't need water or fossil fuels to produce power. And it can be located right where the power is needed, in the middle of nowhere, or it can be tied into the power grid. Solar PV is growing fast, and it can play a big role in America's clean energy economy, anywhere the sun shines.
Awesome. I figured that Ken might like that because he had gotten into the weeds on some of the technical stuff. This is just basically to show, that we need direct sunlight because of the fact that we have some refraction going on. And if you are like me and you drive around town and you see, oh God, somebody installed that solar system and it's underneath a huge tree, that's a problem. Things that you can't unsee. You go to the next slide. So PV advantages and disadvantages, like the person on that DOE video just said, no moving parts, all these kinds of things, relatively easy to install. I think people get sticker shock. Have any of you already gone through the process of getting any solar quotes and sort of put them on the shelf because you're like, oh dear God, that's a lot of money? Yeah. So one thing I want to encourage you to think about is going back and looking at how much you've spent in the last 5 years to the utility. And we'll go through some math on what costs are, so that maybe help allay a little bit of that anxiety. And I get it, it's a huge cost when you think about like, oh, $20,000, that's a lot. As opposed to the utility has us really well conditioned to like pay as you go, right? And you really don't have a choice when the bill goes up. And anyway, so we need direct sunlight. It's super sensitive to shading. And some people have aesthetic issues. So we'll talk a little bit about that as it relates to siting of the solar. The next slide, please. Here's just an exploded diagram. People want to know all the time, like, so am I just feeding the grid? And think about the fact that electrons follow the path of least resistance, right? So if you're home, this guy's here working on his computer, somebody's down here in the kitchen, we've got a TV on, those electrons that are being produced, not on a day like today, but on a sunny day, those electrons would be produced off of your roof. They would come down through the inverter. If you have a string inverter, which this is, many of the new installations that I see a lot of people doing have micro inverters up on each panel. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but the inverter takes the direct current, right? So those are electrons that are only flowing in one direction, goes down here. This inverter turns the DC current, it synchronizes it with the sine wave on the AC side, which is AC is the type of power that our homes use, sends it into your electrical panel, and then feeds the load. So you are actually able to use those solar electrons in your home. When I plug in my electric car and the sun is shining, I can say that my car is running on solar power. Plug in at night? No. So anyway, that's, if you're not using all of the power that is being generated off of your solar system, we have net metering in Massachusetts. These electrons go back through your meter. You must have a bidirectional meter, which means it can spin in both directions. And you are sending electrons back out onto the grid, and you get credit for that. Next slide. Any questions about this one? Pretty straightforward. Okay, next slide. So this cool thing is called a Solar Pathfinder. If you are interested, you can borrow them from Self-Reliance. We have a bunch of them. And you can sign one out, and you can mess around. And if you're not super comfortable getting up on the roof, I don't advocate for that. But it is a really great tool, even if you want to know where you should put a new garden. This is a little domed thing. It has a compass here. These numbers are indicative of the days, the hours in the day. And then these little dotted lines are indicative of the months of the year. So we have the lowest sun months up here, right? December, January, and November. February, October, and on down the line to when we're here in the May, April, June months. And so this is a really cool low-tech thing that you can put up on your roof. You can see the asphalt shingles here. And it'll tell us, is there a good solar window here? What we need in this longitude and latitude is clean, unfettered space on our roof, or wherever we're going to put our solar array, between 9 and 3. And this shows you, that's a person, but it shows you where you have shading issues. And if you had a branch or a tree that was sticking up here, we'd want to move. I'm not a big advocate for cutting trees down. I think trimming is really good. I would certainly say to you, if you said, hey, I live in a place where there's a ton of white pine trees and old oaks, and I want to put solar up, I'm going to cut down 50 trees, I would say, I do not advocate for that, because the ecosystem benefits that we get from all those trees is much greater than what the solar will provide. So we want to make sure there's no shading. The roof angle is pretty important, as is the azimuth, in terms of that's like southwest, southeast, that's the angle that the roof is facing. We can do fixed, adjustable are the two that I see most common. Just because we're in a northern latitude, we really don't see a lot of tracking systems. And you mentioned the solar flower. And for those of you who may be on social media, sometimes these things pop up and you're like, I wonder if that works. The thing that is, it's a good thing, but it would work better if you lived in like Arizona, where you have more sun, and that there is cost associated with having a tracking system. We definitely advocate that you are close. You put your installation close to where you're using that electricity, and you have to have some airflow behind, because they need to be able to be cooled. Next, they don't produce super well. Yeah.
That position right there is a good one for you for this this camera.
Sorry.
Yeah.
All right, so ground-mounted systems, just pretty plain and simple. Is this okay for where I'm saying?
Yep.
All right, so we've got something that's located on the ground versus a roof-mounted system, which is what we see over on the right-hand side. I like that slide because you can actually see, while there's a shadow there, it shows you that these are up off of the roof, right? Because they need to have, there's racking underneath them so that you have some circulation. Did you have a question? Okay. Next slide, please.
It's not advancing. There we go. Okay.
All right, here's some awning mounts. We've seen this one already, but I just love that ground-mounted system. This is an awning mount that was taken late in the day. I know I was just railing against shading issues. This was taken well after the sun had moved across the 3 o'clock mark. But this is a friend's barn who wanted to put up some PV, and it also helps shade, keep the weather off of her horses. And I like this picture because you can see what it looks like from an awning mount, right? The bottom right-hand side is another one where if you have, it can serve a dual purpose. keep the rain and snow off of the doorway, as well as generating some electricity. Just some other examples, right? On the side of a house, on the upper left there, you can do some kind of cool shelter over your porch. Next slide. That's more up close, so you can see like window wells and you know, things like that. Just again, just sort of spur creative thinking around what's possible at your own home is why I wanted to show you these different types of things. And then if we think about our cars, right? That's super important. And then you can have your charger out there.
So Meg, is that self-contained? So there's actually like a place to plug in for those cars?
This one, I don't see that, but I think it's, you know, it's where I want your mind to go.
All right.
I want you to have a little pedestal here that has your charger. In my pole barn that I have 7.5 kilowatts on the top of my pole barn, and the inverter is in there, and I have a 240 outlet for my level 2 charger. So it's right there. Next slide, please. That's another one, right? You have a garden shed and a little place to pull in your car, and unfortunately, yeah, I think that's a garden hose, but I'm hoping that there's an EV charger on the other side of that. And that's my pole barn under construction. And so you can see I have like trees that are over 100 feet tall around my house. My house is behind that, and it has over 3 kilowatts on the roof, and that was like maxed out space. So I worked with my solar contractor and said, hey, I would like to do more because I'm gonna be going electric and decarbonizing. What can we do? And so we put up this pole barn, and it's great. It is, you know, it's multi-purpose, but inside of it has the EV charger. There's the, I have a string inverter, so that's, you know, I don't have micro inverters up there. It comes down, the wiring comes down. It's all squirrel proof, because remember that squirrels like to eat PVC, and all of your wires are coated with PVC. So you want to make sure that when you are getting a proposal, that you have squirrel guard included in your proposal, because those little buggers go under there and they can cause a mess, and we don't want to cause any kind of shorting or any, you know, any issues with that. Next slide. This picture over here on the right-hand side happens to be a LEED certified building in Santa Monica, California, that I drove by and was like, I gotta back up and take a picture of this. What's wrong with that picture?
The slides are not at the right angle, or the panels are not at the right angle.
Oh, they're behind trees.
They're behind trees. There is like over 5 kW of PV in the shade. And if you know about LEED, they got points for that, which shame on them. And this was taken off of a local solar installer's roof, you know, like the picture of things they've done on people's roofs. And I was like, ooh, should have taken that after the tree trimming was done. Because clearly the guy was probably up on the roof with his bum in that tree.
Doesn't the angle on the one on the right side also affect it? Because you had mentioned earlier that the angle is very important.
It is, absolutely.
So something vertical like that really going
like
to be.
This, maybe, again, I can't remember the angle, like, or the direction. I'm pretty sure this was facing south. But yeah, if we wanted to see a really good installation instead of this, take it up and put it on the roof, right? This was more for street cred, I think, right? And the first LEED in the LEED building in Times Square, they had got points for a bunch of solar on the north-facing roof of their building, or sorry, north-facing wall of their building. So again, not good. If you have shading issues, your PV just doesn't work. And if you have a string inverter, which, you know, a lot of the older systems have, and you can still get a string inverter for your system, it's literally like standing on the hose. Not all the electrons are going to go out of that. With microinverters, they just shut down. But that's kind of useless because there's never going to be sunshine down here, right? I'm just trying to really drive home a point. This is one of the worst ones. Like I said, I was literally driving down the street and slammed the brakes on. Next slide. All right, microinverters. Again, these are the kinds of things that when you are talking to potential installers, they may or may not ask you if you are interested in in microinverters. These cool little guys are on the back of each single panel. They do the AC/DC transformation up there, and they're warranted for 20 years, similarly to your PV modules. And they pull that panel offline if it is getting any kind of shading, which is super important because you don't want that kink in the electron hose. Does that make sense? Okay, next.
Could I make a comment here
Yes.
too? So my installation has optimizers instead of microinverters. So it transmits DC from the panel to the inverter downstairs.
Yeah.
And it also has individual panel control. So you don't have to just, have the microinverters are great, but the option is optimizers.
Right, so there's the third option is yes.
And there's some technical reasons for choosing one or the other, but that's.
All right, so here is a little bit of math, and I know I'm kind of early for this, but have a sip of coffee. I'm going to walk you through this. 5 kilowatts of PV used to be more than most people needed. But now that we're really talking about moving over to decarbonize our homes and make sure that, we get rid of that gas dryer, that we move over to a induction stovetop, that number is going to grow. And that again goes back to why I was recommending you look at what your kilowatt hour consumption is for 12 months. That's spelled out on your Eversource bill. But for just, discussion's sake, we'll start off with a 5 kW system. People want to know how much roof space is it going to take up. It's about 96 square feet per kilowatt. So, there's a almost 500 square foot chunk of roof space. Does not have to be in the same, people have a portion on one part of the roof and then a portion on another part of the roof, if that's what needs to happen. These solar installers, they're really crafty people. They can do a lot on their online siting tools. What we're seeing, and again, this is sort of an average right now, is about $3.45 a watt. When we started doing our installations back in 2002, that price was $8. So the things have come down dramatically. Thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, we got that 30% tax credit back. So you can see that there's a $1,000 state tax credit for Massachusetts if the home is your primary residence. We need to think about what the annual production in kilowatt hours is going to be, because again, that relates back to how much of this PV system is going to cover what I'm using. This is a moving target, this smart value, because there's, projects in the queue. Things like our region is a little slower than some of the other regions in terms of where we are in block such and such. But that again would be spelled out on your proposal. They will give you a value associated with that. And it's a 20-year contract, which is pretty good. We're looking at what our electricity value is. Our electricity, in the 35 cent per kilowatt range right now. And then we add up those, your smart and your value of your electricity to kind of figure out what your payback is. This is like simple ROI. There's no cost of money and all of that fun stuff in here. But we're in the range of 5-year payback, which is pretty good, right? When you think about that sticker shock, and I will say, like, almost every solar company that I have looked at a proposal from, they give you like, here's the cost of doing nothing. And it's kind of staggering. But I am super, like, a huge advocate for ownership, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But 5 years, it goes by like that. And to not have an electricity bill from Eversource is really, really nice. I haven't paid an electricity bill since 2008. I have a nice chunk of credits, and I actually give some credits to people, and you can do that, right? If you have a family member that lives in another town, you can give them credits. Every once in a while I hear MVY is like, you can gift your net metering credits to us. So, you know, there's lots of things that we can do. This is something we probably never thought of 20 years ago, right? It's a new currency. All right. You can do solar loans. I know Cape Cod 5 is one of the companies that offers, the banking companies that offers a solar loan. And super excited that we have a climate bank coming under the Healy-Driscoll administration. Just on a call on this 2 days ago. So exciting. So in particular, for those folks who are living on fixed incomes, regardless of what your assets are, it's based on your income. This climate bank will be available to help mitigate some of the sting that comes with that big price tag, $17,000. And if you are low to moderate income, there will be some other incentives coming around. Yeah.
Who did you say does the solar loans now?
So Cape Cod 5 is one of the companies that offers the solar loan. And I know like the Cape Light Compact applied to USDA a number of years ago, and we've just been waiting. There was supposed to be a loan guarantee for folks, you know, to like buy down the interest rates, kind of like we have the the heat loan that you can get if you need to put in a new heating system. It's, you know, it's through Mass Save, but it basically takes our energy efficiency dollars and buys it down so it's zero interest. I think the idea is to do something similar along those lines. But the one at Cape Cod 5 right now is probably just regular old interest rate. I know some people have in the past just done like a line of credit, and then once they get the, you know, if you're really diligent and you take this, you know, the tax credit, so you're sort of playing banker with yourself, like, okay, I didn't have to pay that $5,175, which I should know you can take over the course of 3 years. And you pay that, you take that money out of your pocket and you pay your loan down, and you take your smart money and you pay that down, and you take your $1,000 that you would, you know, your credit that you would be paying to Massachusetts. You can drive down that cost pretty quickly. Yeah, that takes some diligence. Yeah.
Can you explain what the smart value is?
So the smart value is basically, this is a Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources program. And I have to say that like under every administration, it changes, right? Under the Baker administration, we used to have this SREC, which is the Solar Renewable Energy Certificate program. And they changed it, they made their own thing. So I don't know if we're gonna see something different under the Healy-Driscoll administration. I don't know if they're just like, hey, we're gonna work with what we've got. I have no intel on that at all. But it's basically an agreement with the utilities, right? With the publicly owned utilities, Eversource and National Grid, to say like, all right, you're getting electrons, clean electrons back into the grid. You need to reward for that, okay? And so if we back up into sort of the land of deregulation and alternative compliance payments, what used to be the SREC, it was a much greater fee that they paid, but there's more renewable energy now in our fuel pool, and so these rates have gone down, and obviously the deregulated side of the utility doesn't want to be super supportive of that. Okay, does anybody else have any questions about what we're looking at here? Yeah.
On the 30% federal tax credit.
Yes.
Could you explain to us what happens every year? It doesn't all happen at one time, the rate numbers.
So the federal tax credit, if you don't, you have to have a tax appetite in order to take that, right? You have to owe at least something when you do your taxes, right? If you can't take all of it, if you could only take $2,000 of it, let's say you did an installation in 2022, and you say, oh, okay, I owe $2,000 this year to the feds. You could take a credit of $2,000 and you would have the remaining $3,175 for the next 2 years to take as a credit. Does that make sense?
Doesn't go into a 5-year program? Only
No, you
3
can
years?
take it over the course of 3 years.
Only 3 years.
Only
Yeah.
3 years is what they say.
Megan,
Yes,
I was just gonna add to the SPARK thing, because there's still a little confusion on that. The easiest way to think of the SPARK program is you get a check from Eversource.
That's
once a
right.
month. And the amount declines over 10 years, but it is a check you get for just the amount you can produce solar panels.
that's right. So yes, and it does, when you get us, I think the clearest thing to do is to have a solar, I recommend at least 3 companies that you get quotes from, at least 3, because they are wildly different. I will tell you that in the last 6 months, I saw a proposal from a company that was over in Sandwich that was charging $7.50 a watt. And I was like, oh my God, I haven't seen that since like 2005. And this guy signed the contract, which was really unfortunate. So it's super important. If you have friends and neighbors that have done this and they're willing to sit down with you and kind of go over stuff, you can always make an appointment with me and I will go over stuff with you. We can dig into all kinds of stuff. But the company should tell you where in the queue you would fall and what that number would be for that contract. So yeah, any other questions before we go beyond? Yeah,
When you have a solar array
Yes.
and you're producing this power,
yes.
does your meter actually run backwards?
It does, and if it doesn't, you need to call Eversource right away.
And then you just
The-
pay what-
That's right.
No, and actually there are 2 meters that you get. There's a
Yeah, I
production
have a
meter.
picture. I'll show you what it looks like, but your meter mine's way across the way, but if it's on your house or on a pedestal somewhere, it would have a little sticker on it, a little red sticker that says net. And I have a friend who the utility didn't do that right away. And he was like, oh my God, my electric bill is enormous. And all we had to do was look at it and we're like, oh, they're billing you for what you're net metering. And so we had to have a little. But that's incumbent upon, any solar installer, when they put their interconnection agreement into Eversource, that triggers that for the utility to then come out and replace your meter with a bidirectional meter.
But the smart payment is tied to your production meter. So whatever
That's
you
right.
produce, that's what they'll pay you for.
Yeah.
And the net is what you pay Eversource.
Or not.
Yeah, or not. Right.
There was another hand, yeah.
Does the new federal tax law have any impact on the 30% federal tax credit? Does it change at all?
No, and actually, as soon as that bill was signed in August, it went from 26% back up to 30. And the 30% tax credit, I want to say it's till like 2036. So yeah, this is a really good thing because it had been at 30% for a super long time, like probably since, a long time. The 70s? Yeah.
Maybe not related to cost, but I was talking to some folks, I never got to the point where they actually have a quote, but they were talking about, they said they still put panels now on the north side of the roof. Because they can get so much reflected light, the panels have gotten better. Is this nonsense or not worth it?
I would say, I would rather see somebody put an installation on the ground, well sited on the ground, than on the north side.
Well, I
of the
assume facing the
Yeah.
sun is always best, but they.
Yes,
they
you could
claim
do
that
like
they
a
have-
southeast,
Yeah.
you could do south, which is optimal, and again, unshaded, and southwest is really good. South and southwest are really good. North, depends again on the angle, and I really would, if let's say you get 3 proposals and only one solar installer decides that they're gonna put panels on the north side, if it sounds too good to be true, just think about that. And also remember that trees grow and your roof doesn't. And so thinking about like, how close is that tree? And right now it might not show up on your solar pathfinder reading, but 20 years out, I just had to take a couple trees down that were shading my solar hot water system. And last year at this time, I had like, maybe 80 degrees in my 1,500 gallon solar hot water tank. And this year, I mean, granted, it has to do with the sun shining and everything, but shading has a big impact. I'm now at like 120 degrees in March, which is pretty good. So taking two trees down was painful, but we did it. Any other questions? Yeah, in back.
I have two questions.
Sure.
You had mentioned about when you're putting the panels, wherever you decide to put them.
Yep.
It needs to be near your electrical box.
It does not. If you were to put it way out in the field, like in the back 40, just remember you got to run an electrical line, and there's loss with however long that run is, and cost associated with that as well. Yeah.
And the second question, what about if you already have a generator?
So that's totally fine. I'm going to talk a little bit about power outages and resilience in a little bit, but that's definitely something that you would want to discuss with your solar installer and their electrician. So is yours like already plugged into your main electrical panel? Like when
It's like a redundant panel. It's a full house generator.
Okay, so, but it talks to your main panel and it knows when the grid power goes down.
Yeah.
So it has what is called an anti-islanding device, which basically, if that generator were to backfeed, this is getting into the weeds on this, but this is the same thing with solar, right? When the power goes down, there is what's called an anti-islanding device. So if the Eversource guy is out there working on the pole, you are not going to electrocute him because there is a mechanism in there that shuts down the power. The same thing happens in your generator, but you can set it up so that if the sun is shining and you're generating power off the roof, you can use that in sort of in conjunction with your generator. It's just, you need to have somebody who's super technical and knows about this stuff. Yeah.
If you have a 10-year-old roof and you put solar panels on it, should you replace that roof?
That is a question for the solar installer. Usually they come out and they have a look and they'll tell you, what they think. And they'll make a recommendation. On the roof side of things, I would definitely like getting a solar installation quote. I would recommend that you get a lot of proposals because they can also be wildly different in price and the quality of things. The good thing is that, I mean, it's open to interpretation, but I do know that people have, if you do it in the same year and you have done that, 10 years, normally you would not do your roof over in 10 years, but let's say that the solar installer is like, you know what, I think it would probably be good. You can get the 30% tax credit, right? I know of people who have gotten the 30% tax credit because you are doing it specifically to support the solar. But that's something you should take up with your tax accountant. Does that make sense? Does that help? But they'll tell you if it's, and the other thing to know is that like, once you have panels up there, that section of the roof is not going to get beat up by the UV. It's protected. So that's a really good thing. And the south facing side is usually what gets hammered, right?
Yeah. So the installation you have there as an example, 17,000. So some of that I assume is the actual panel, some of it is the cost of installation. So if you don't have a large south facing roof,
yeah,
you have a little piece that you can use. I mean, where does that break down? Is it like when it's so small, it's no longer worth it?
That's a good question. I would say, again, like if it's just up on your roof that you're thinking, this again is something where you could go home and look around and be like, could I put a little carport up? Do I need a little shed? Or I burn wood and I would like to have a little area there where the roof for my wood shed. There's lots of different ways to accomplish this. Yeah, Rosemary.
Okay, I got a text from someone on Zoom. Can you repeat the questions?
Oh, sure. Sorry. Okay, so the question is how, and I'm paraphrasing here, how small of a system makes sense? Would you say that's, yeah. I mean, I will say, I've seen, people put up a kilowatt because that's what they can do. Something is helpful, but I will say that also the cost of pulling the permits, getting the crew out there, all of that stuff is the same if you're gonna do a 10 kilowatt system or if you're gonna do a 2 kilowatt system. So I think that, you know, if you want to have an offline conversation about that, I'm perfectly happy to have that conversation with you too. Lynn?
Just thinking that maybe in a situation like that, something like community solar might be.
Yes,
more
and
helpful.
I will talk about that too. I have a couple of slides to talk about community shared solar. Yeah.
In cases like, such as you're describing now, where you have certain parts that look as though they could be promising.
Yes.
Is it possible to put some kind of metering on these to see just exactly how much sun they would get?
So if
you know whether you're in fact, whether this is worth it or not?
Yeah, so can we go back a couple slides here, David? How does that work? Just if you can go back to that solar pathfinder. Just a bunch of slides back. Yes, okay.
Yes, that's it.
This tool, you only need to, you just take it up on the roof, doesn't matter what time of the year. It will show you, you know, we basically have this great solar window here between 9 and 3 for the entire year. And it'll show you, like, you got some issues here that you might want to do some tree trimming. And most of the good solar companies will tell you, they'll go and like either walk with you around the property and say, like, that tree needs to be trimmed. It's going to be a problem now or in 10 years. But if you have a big tree here, that's a problem. Or, you know, it depends. I would say, like, if you're okay with cutting a tree down, that's, and I have a bunch of these, so, and I can show you very quickly how to use them. So if you want to come by my office and sign out one of these things, it's literally like, that's bigger than it actually is. It's only like the size of a dinner plate, right? So you could go around your yard and you could, you know, put it up on the roof if you felt comfortable and sort of see, like, is this? The other thing is on Google, you can look and see where the shading is. Is that helpful?
Yes, it is. So you can get several of these and put them on different parts of your roof.
You just pick it up and move it around.
Okay, move it around. Okay.
Yeah, because it is literally, it's giving you a 12-month snapshot right there, right? Regardless of the season, it'll tell you, like, these are the stinky production months, right? When the sun is super low here in New England. Actually, and it's specific to our longitude and latitude within a few degrees. But it tells you, like, here, you'd be generating solar in the peak time of the year, right? May, June, and July, from 7 a.m. And if that guy weren't standing there until 6. So it shows you literally what you would, even if you want to put a garden in, it shows you, like, oh, I could put, you know, I could grow this stuff here. You can just pick it up and move it around. Does that help?
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
it would.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Oh, yeah.
One more question on that. We're dealing here with panels, but if one's got a roof that's already 30 years old and looking to replace the roof, there are options that are built into roofs now too, right?
There are, and I'm not a huge advocate.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, like, it has to do with the fact that we are in a northern, you know, latitude, and we have lots of days like this. If you were in Arizona or California, I would say definitely think about those kinds of things. But the efficiency of the panels it's based on our weather data, and it's based on our longitude and latitude. And, you know, there are panels out there that are probably in like the 13% efficiency all the way up to 21. That's not fabulous, right? If we were talking about solar hot water today, we would be talking about like 60 to 70% efficiency, but we're not. We're talking about electricity. And so when you're talking about the efficiency of some of those thin film modules that are like shingles and that kind of thing, we're in like the 3 to 6% efficiency. So you have to do so much more. And it's, there's one up near where my office is, and it's in the shade. And it's not, again, I'm like, really? You probably paid through the nose for that. And show me the money? You know, it's like, it's really unfortunate that those things happen. But again, I think people invest in those things, and but just get a couple quotes, right? Because that's really the thing. I've had people come and say, hey, I got this really good quote, and the guy wouldn't actually give the quote to me, but it, you know, was like super, it sounded super good to me. And I'm like, all right, well, let's call 4 other companies. We got the 4 other quotes that are all pretty much in line with each other. And I'm like, that guy that wouldn't give you anything, like, do not pass go and do not pay $200. Next. Any more questions on this? Good? Yes. I can come and see.
If you oversize, or you just estimating the amount of power you use and everything correctly. If you oversize, you tell people about the credit.
Microphone, is it not working?
You don't get cash back. So you tell people about the credits, how long they last.
Yes, okay, so it's sort of a 2-part question, or there's a 2-part answer, I should say. The question is about the credits. And when you have net metering credits, which is the credit of spinning your meter backwards.
That is not good.
Those don't go away, right? You have those indefinitely in your little Eversource piggy bank. If you have smart money, right, that's based on what your production is. Does that make sense? So that money gets paid to you. It used to get paid on a quarterly basis, but David, did you say you get paid on a monthly basis now? Yeah, okay, so people get paid with the SMART program on a monthly basis. So they're basically like truing everything up. If you are overproducing, and there are some rules about this in terms of how big of a system you can put up on your residential roof or property, it's really associated with your meter, how big that system can be in order to not get penalized. If you are sending credits you're overproducing and you're sending credits, it used to be a 1-for-1 value.
Yeah.
My understanding is that now you take a 40% haircut on the value of those credits when you're sending them somewhere else. So does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah,
So do you have a
absolutely.
microphone?
They're really wanting you to size your system appropriately. And I will say, I've talked to a couple people recently who were like, I should have made my system a little bigger because now I went back to my installer. It's not quite big enough for what I want for the heat pumps, and they won't call me back, right? Because it's like, oh, you just want to add a kilowatt. So in terms of oversizing it right now, that's why I put that slide up that has all those different things to think about. It's super important not to be in a rush on this and really, really think through, what are my plans? Do I think in 5 years I'll have an electric car? And do I think that in the next 8 years I'll have everything in my house electric? That's super important, right? Because this system's going to work for 25 years. So does that answer? Yeah.
I don't understand this business about overproducing.
Okay. So the question is about overproducing from your PV panels. So if you only need 5,000 kilowatt hours on an average year, and you have a system that's producing 6,500 kilowatt hours on an annual basis, that's overproduction. Those credits are gonna go into your little Eversource piggy bank, and they won't cash you out on that. So, you know, why would you wanna pay for a bigger system if you're like already electrified? It's that kind of question. But if you say like, you know, I'm gonna give those to a person who lives in a low-income house, or, you know, Habitat for Humanity, I'm gonna gift my excess credits, then you have a plan for that. And it's not just sitting there doing nothing for you.
So that piggy bank never goes away. It's just that
Correct.
you don't get to use it.
You do get to use it if you
make well.
If you decide like, I'm gonna have 2 electric cars now, and that's definitely gonna draw down some of that excess usage, or, you know, the excess storage of credits in your Eversource account. Does that make sense?
A month of cloudy days.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or, yes, snowstorm.
So,
Snowstorm, that's right, absolutely. Yeah.
Hey, David, can I make a comment? Can people hear me or not here?
we can hear you, yeah. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. It's just in terms of the Solar Pathfinder tool that Megan is talking about, that looks like a really neat kind of thing. but I wouldn't want people to get the impression they have to do that themselves. That's really useful for lots of purposes, but there are other ways to do it. You don't have to go yourself and do that kind of measurement.
No,
But
solar companies do that. They
yeah.
do a first blush on the computer. They have software, they look at, you tell them what your residence number is, they look that up, and they can tell you, this is what we would recommend for your, they'll talk to you about what your current electrical consumption is, they'll talk to you about what are your electrification plans, all of those things that I've been talking about, right? Trying to plant the seeds for you guys to think about this stuff. And then you tell them, and then they spit out a proposal for you that has cool little superimposed solar panels on your roof. Does that make sense? Yeah.
You were loosely talking about planning for the future.
Yes.
You were loosely talking about whether you want to anticipate plan for future growth.
Yes.
Loosely speaking, because this is all different for everybody.
Sure.
If I was needing 5 kilowatt now to run the house.
Yep.
But I plan on getting an EV car.
Yes.
In a year or two.
Yes.
Is that going to add half a kilowatt?
That depends on the car that you buy.
Well, not a hybrid. Let's say you're buying a straight. And I know it probably depends on the number of miles you drive.
It does, absolutely. But that's all of, that's something that you can go online. There's lots of good information about that. I didn't put this in the in any slide, but there's this really great nonprofit online called Rewiring America. And you can find, they have like so many really cool tools online that help you based on your zip code. There's all kinds of, they have information about what the IRA incentives are. How much do I need? Energy Sage is another platform that you can find out a lot of good information.
Energy Sage, is it?
Energy Sage, like the plant, S-A-G-E.
Okay, thank you.
It's actually a clearinghouse for solar contractors as well. I'm not super excited about what I've seen from quotes coming out of that, but I'm just sort of putting that out there as a caveat. But they have amazing amounts of information. You can find community shared solar available on there, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And there's all kinds of stuff about usage from heat pumps, and if I have this size heat pump, this is how much it would use at this temperature, and also that kind of mind-bending stuff. So yeah, does that help you? Because it's really, you would want to get some more detail than just tell your solar, your prospective solar contractor, hey, I'm going to add an EV to my usage. They might have sort of a high number, but it depends on how much you want to geek out on the numbers on that stuff. Yeah.
So we have a bunch of questions in the chat, but maybe
sure.
we could just hold them until you finish your presentation.
Okay. Lynn, did you have a question?
Well, pretty much the same. I was just
Okay.
going to suggest that we proceed with more of the presentation. And
I'm almost done.
Take care of the questions at the end.
All right, so these are the things that I want you to think about when you are going out on your adventure. Locally owned installers. That's super important. They hire local people. Those dollars stay in our local economy. That's really, really important to me. Hopefully that's important to you as well. NABCEP, which is the North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners. You want to look for companies that have NABCEP certification. That means that these folks have gone through training programs and they know what they're doing. It helps, with some of the sketchiness that you can come across. This third point is something, again, this is so personal in terms of what you care about, and I'm not putting my judgy pants on, I'm just saying it's something to think about. Traceability. In our global economy, does it matter to you where your modules are being made? What is the environmental impact of that? So think about that, and that's, I spend a lot of time with folks, like they'll tell me, Larry, these are the panels that are listed on my proposal, and I can tell you, all right, that company's manufacturing here, it's owned by these folks, and you can ask for US manufactured components. And so thinking about, are there child labor laws around the manufacturing of this stuff? Are there environmental regulations around the waste associated with this stuff? All those things again, I'm talking to you about stuff that I'm super passionate about. So if it doesn't matter to you, that's totally fine. And yeah, check references. That's super important. Again, in our community, we have a lot of solar. For a really long time, Falmouth was one of the highest numbers of installed capacity in the Commonwealth. So there are a lot of friends and neighbors that have solar, and they can tell you who the good installers are. And you know, at Self-Reliance, we have a list of folks that, you know, we consistently check references on. Go talk to our electrical inspector and find out what he has to say. We used to have a guy that was here for a super long time, Gary Forbes, and I can tell you, I don't know who the current electrical inspector is, because the last guy, I think, is not here anymore. But it's, you know, that can be part of your reference check. Chat up people and ask the companies too. You know, that's a little more biased because they've actually gone with those companies, but it's super important to take that time, I think, to call folks and be like, hey, how was your experience with whatever? And I'm just going to go back and say, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. There are companies that are still, I live out in Hatchville, and one of my neighbors said, you know, there was a guy selling solar walking down the road. I'm like, really? You can be killed if you're walking down the road where I live. It's, you know, the road is small. And anyway, but I was like, did you get any material from him? Nope. So those things are huge red flags for me. I want to see a proposal. I want to see, they might not tell you what the cost per watt is, but we can do the math, right? And that's part of what we look at. And definitely think about ownership versus leasing, because that's another thing that I kind of have, and that if it sounds too good to be true, you know, they're going to do an installation for me for free. And if any of you have read the unfortunate incidences that happened in Yarmouth with Solar Wolf, that was definitely, it was way too good to be true from the very beginning, and people still signed the contracts. Like, we can't help ourselves, which is unfortunate, because we don't want to be billed for something that we're not getting. But leasing, that's, you know, again, I will sit down with you, and I'm sure there's other folks that will sit down with you and kind of go through the nitty gritty and like, oh, hey, there's a percentage riser in here that's going to hit you every year. And that wasn't spelled out in the first 2 pages of this proposal to you. And they're kind of banking on that because they gave you a 30-page proposal to sign off on. And 5 years, right? Remember that about 5 year payback? In fact, it was 4.48 years when I did the math, but on that little thing that I had up there on the slide. But when you're in a lease, you're in it for 20 years, right? And so most of us make a 20-year, 30-year commitment when we buy our house. And this is a better thing if you can like make it work for you to do the ownership piece. It's definitely in your favor.
Amber?
Megan.
Oh, sorry, Megan, sorry.
Yeah.
Does your last name start with an A?
It does.
Sorry.
But that's my alter ego is Amber. Amber Sniper, as some people have called me.
My question is, what if you own? Do you then have to buy a maintenance package that comes with it? So when you go locally owned and you buy it yourself, there's no maintenance that you have to pay on it, and does it ever need service? And what if it does, and what do you do?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So most of these systems, you know, like for the most part, the inverters go until like well past their expectancy and past the warranty. So when I put my first installation in, the warranty was only good for 10 years on the inverter. And like I said, those micro inverters, those are warranted for 25 years. But there are no moving parts, so there's really no maintenance. A fuse can go out, like on the Vineyard, there's voltage fluctuations out there that are bananas. And so people had issues with their inverters just blowing up. We don't have that problem here in Falmouth. thankfully. But for the most part, those things are covered under warranty should you have any kind of problems. Squirrels eating the PVC wire, that's not covered by warranty, but that's why you would want to get the squirrel guard. Does that help? Yeah.
If you're talking about a $17,000 cost.
Yes.
If you're talking about a $17,000 cost, how much would it be for like the panels, the box and the installation? Just a easy breakdown.
Yeah, so that is, it's all based on, the way I look at it as the easiest apples to apples comparison is the price per watt of installation, right? Because the labor costs are built in, the racking, the wiring, all of those things, right? The panels, the inverter, the revenue grade meter, all of that stuff is part of this kit that you're going to get and that's going to be installed. The permits that the installer has to pull with the municipality, the inspector, has to come out and inspect that. There's paperwork that needs to be filed with Eversource, which is called an interconnection agreement. There's time that's spent on that. So that's all, it's an all-inclusive thing. You can go online and try and buy something, but you would need to have a licensed electrician to do the installation.
Is it about 50-50 permits versus equipment?
No, I mean, I don't know what the current price for a permit is, but there's administrative time to fill out the permits and to do all of that stuff. So this is $3.35 a watt is really quite good. As I said, when I started this, when our program started in 2002, we were at about $8 a watt. So that price has come down dramatically. The panels have come down, but they sort of bounced back up just due to supply chain issues and the cost of copper and all of that kind of stuff, right, with wiring. If any of you have even tried to do any home repairs, you know that everything is out. It's crazy expensive.
Are we continuing the questions or are we finishing?
I just want to go to the next, we can go to the next slide, but do the math, right? That's the thing. Make sure you do the math. All right, here's what it looks like. It can look like. You might want to go home and check out if your main electrical panel has any room in it. Mine does not look like this. The one on the right-hand side. Is everybody familiar with where their electrical panel is? If you have room, which this one does, this is ready for electrification. So you have lots of space to put in your heat pumps. Down, I threw this up here because down on the left-hand side, that's a double pole breaker that is where the solar goes in. So it is a super clean connection into the panel. And so here we have an inverter, right? This is the wires are coming down from the panel up above somewhere that we can't see. And we have an on and off switch here. We've got the power that then comes in here. This is what's called a lockable disconnect that the utility requires. So if there were some kind of emergency out there, if your house was on fire or something, they can come and shut that off. And then this is your revenue grade meter, which David mentioned. So this is basically truing up what this guy, the inverter, has its own little counter of how many kilowatt hours your system is producing. And this is there to true that up. And it talks via a data acquisition system. It talks with the systems that do the smart program and all of that fun stuff. So that's something else that the solar installers make sure that happens, is that this is all electric, you have to have Wi-Fi talking to the system so that your reporting can happen and all of that fun stuff. Does that make sense? I have one of these outside and I also have one in my basement. So depending upon your own personal situation, if you have the system outside on a ground mounted system, these things are weatherproof. So they're totally fine to be out in the weather. I just wanted to add here, because there are incentives now through this, the IRA piece at the federal government. So you can upgrade your electrical panel if your panel looks like mine and it has no room and a side line tap in it. So up to $4,000 incentive plus a $600 tax credit for updating your electrical panel, just because you want to do electrification, right? That's important. And then there's the wiring component of that as well. So that's up to $2,500. And there are some income qualifiers in here. And again, this has to do with income, not your assets. So 100% for low income, which is 80% of the area median income. And then there's a moderate income thing where they cover 50% of the cost. And that's if you're within the 80 to 150% of the area median income. And yeah.
So this right side panel, is that a good panel or a bad panel?
This is a good panel. There's lots of room. So these are breakers, right? If you have some short that happens in your house and you have to run down and like trip a breaker, that would usually be red. But these little gray spots here, those are empty spaces. So there's lots of room. Your electrician would come in and be like, yay, thank you. There's room in here.
So not to like badmouth, but I had somebody look at my panel like 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
And my panel looks just like that.
Yes.
And he told me it wouldn't pass inspection and it needed to be upgraded. That's why I'm asking the question.
That's interesting. I am not an electrician, nor do I play one on TV, so I could not give you this information. I would definitely have if you're thinking about solar, they'll look at your panel and they'll tell you, because they have licensed electricians that work for them. But it also has to do with the size of the service coming into the house, right? Because that's important in terms of a draw. If you are not going to put PV up on the roof and you're going to add more electrical consumption, heat pumps, an electric dryer, all of that stuff adds up. And think about it from a hose perspective, right? If the hose isn't big enough to bring all those electrons in there, you might have to upgrade it. But that's why it's great that there is incentives now and that's another thing to shop around. Like, I cannot stress that enough, that you get multiple quotes for everything that you're thinking about, because the prices are wildly different. Some people don't want the work. I've seen, you want something that they've never heard of, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna overprice that sucker, and you better not sign that contract. Yeah.
Can you just clarify what you mean by $4,000 incentive?
So that's a good question. And if you go onto that Rewiring America site, they have a really good explanation for it and get into the weeds. I only had a certain amount of space on the slide, but it's a cash back incentive. These things are being worked out. They will be forthcoming this year. The Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources will be our conduit for that federal money. And there's, we're not going to talk today too much about heat pumps at all, but for those of you who are thinking about whole home heat pump systems, there is a ton of money coming out, and it's a place to kind of get lost, but it depends on your income, where those, which programs you can hop into. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask one more question?
You sure can.
Are you gonna touch on battery versus
I
no
am.
battery?
Yeah. Okay, are we good?
Really good questions, but we're gonna need to move on.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're almost done, I promise.
Well, not, yeah. You.
Oh,
Okay, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the Cape Light Compact CBEO program. This is for low income deed restricted properties, and you can apply for free PV and heat pumps, but you have to be at a deed restricted property for affordability, and you must use oil, propane, or electric resistance. So if you know folks that are falling into this category, definitely have them get in touch with the Cape Light Compact, or you can get in touch with me and I will put them on a list to be in the queue for that program. Because there are a lot of our friends and neighbors that probably don't talk about this stuff, right? Struggling with utility bills, whether or not there's a deed restriction on the house, but that's how you get into this program. So super excited that is available. Next slide. Net metering. We talked a little bit about this. It's literally the ability to send your electricity back into the grid if it is renewable. Next slide. All right, so you just asked a question about batteries. If you are not interested in batteries, this is a really cool batteryless inverter, which is made by SMA. And it offers you the ability to have a dedicated circuit when the power is out. It would basically do that dedicated circuit without a battery. But when the sun goes down, you're out of luck. You're out of electrons, I should say. So that's one option, and there are a couple of other manufacturers that make that. If that's of a concern to you when you're talking to your installer, definitely mention that you're interested in, in that. Batteries, I think the next slide, go to the next slide. Okay, so we know there's like the Tesla battery, there's a Sonnen battery, LG. They all make these batteries that will, basically go in your wall and provide you with resilience when the power goes out. They're really expensive and they're really resource intensive, right? There's a lot of stuff in there. My personal way of looking at this is we want to move over to electric vehicles as much as we can. And they have some really cool things out there now that, you can buy a bi-directional charger, or you can buy a vehicle that offers to be your backup generator. So I think we'll see prices come down, and we will be able to use these vehicles as a backup generator. I think the other thing I want to call out is that we have this expectation that when the power goes out, we want to have a whole home generator, right? We want the ability to have everything on. I don't think that is realistic in terms of the way we should be living, right? Because we don't need to be able to turn the lights on and everything. So I would really urge you to think about what are the critical things that I need to have on when the power goes out, right? It would be really nice to be able to fire up. If you have a heating system in place, you want to be able to turn that on, whether it's a heat pump or it's a gas furnace. You want to be able to turn that on, right? That would be high on my list. If you have a refrigerator or freezers, you want to be able to keep those things on, right? So that you have food and the ability to do that. If you're not on town water, you would like to be able to have your pump run. All of those things, like sit down and make a list. Do we spend most of the time, if it's cold and we have a crazy winter storm where there's snow, we spend our time in this room. And is it the same in the summertime when we have a crazy hurricane and the power goes out? Think about those kinds of things, right? This is like getting your worst case scenario handbook out and kind of daydreaming with it a little bit. And then prioritize from that, because that's super helpful. If you have an installer come and you're like, okay, so I have this other thing I'm really interested in doing a battery, and we want to do the whole house. They'll be like, and here is this $50,000 add-on for what you could be doing. That's a lot to not really be able to utilize it that much. That being said, there are incentives for you to feed the power back from that battery into the grid, which I think, Anne, you're going to talk about. So anyway, that's my little soapbox about that. Thinking about using your EV and sort of the community benefit of vehicle to home and vehicle to grid. That's, again, sort of a mind stretcher where I would like to see us thinking about that, whether you're talking about your home or when we have projects that come up in our community, right? As the town in the Commonwealth that has the most coastline and, sea level and storm surge and all kinds of other climate related things, we need to be thinking about all of this stuff as we move forward. So, and thinking about equitable distribution of that is also super important. All right, I think we're almost at the end. Maybe that's the last slide. Community shared solar. This, you can find a community shared solar program. There's one that's income eligible that's out on the Cap landfill in Falmouth. This is just sort of a snapshot from the self-reliance one. We have a waiting list. If you're interested in getting on it, you can certainly call our office and get on there. What we have found is that the incentives have gotten smaller. These things are not fun to manage. Ours offers a 15% discount off of the price of, it's basically like you're buying gift cards. You buy a $100 gift card, but you only pay $85 for it. And it gets applied to your electricity bill. It's super good for income qualified people. And I think if you go on Energy Sage, you can definitely find the ones you just like plug in your zip code and it'll tell you what the open programs are. They're now down to like 10% for people who are not income eligible. But right now, at, 35 cents a kilowatt hour, anything is helpful. We have people who have PV, but not enough, and they also participate in community shared solar. So, again, that's just sort of a snapshot of what that is. Can you click on the YouTube thing? This is the last thing I have.
Yeah. Oh. What's this? What's this?
Does it work?
Well, it says hyperlinks can be harmful to your computer.
Oh, if you just say yes. This is a little guy. This is my plug to basically.
With the old axe.
Nope. Talking about, like, when we talk to kids about the trades, electricians, right? We do not have enough electricians to get us to.
Hours of exhausting labor each year with a bit that
I gotta skip the ad.
Skip the ad.
Yeah, those
You
don't
know
work
that
anyway.
the US will need more than 1 million new electricians by 2030? And that for every new electrician we train in the next decade, 2 electricians are expected to retire or change careers. Less than 2% of all electricians are women. We have the solutions to fix the climate crisis, but we just don't have the electricians to do it. I don't want a job that's boring. I don't want to sit behind a desk. I don't want tens of thousands of dollars in debt when I'm 25. It's time you reconsider how you talk to kids about the trades. Everyone needs to hear us.
So that's my final plea to you, is thinking about the next generation and the trades. Because it's not just electricians, right? We have HVAC contractors, we have, we have a huge need, and we have a fabulous resource with the tech school. And we need to do our deal to save the planet. All right, thank you so much.
We have a bunch of questions in the chat, but hold on. Yeah. But I suggest that we save the questions in the chat until after the other 2 speakers have spoken, if there's time. Okay. So Anne, you're up. I can figure out how to get you on.
You're a hard act to follow. I don't think.
Yeah, it's not time for the
Not
lights.
time for the lights. Okay.
No.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, okay.
So, good afternoon at this point. Thank you
Sorry.
very much. That's okay. So my name is Ann Devenish, and I got the solar bug kind of early as a result of driving down to Woods Hole one day and listening to an interview on WCAI with this interesting gentleman who's talked about putting solar on south-facing roofs. That was in 2003, 2004, which is when we made the first bug. So if you'd be so kind, just go to my next slide. So one of the problems with solar is it's kind of like an addiction. You do it once, you keep doing it. So this was 2004. There was a program in place that would give us about a 30% return on investment. We had to upfront the money. Kilowatts in these days, we were paying about 10,000 per kilowatt. So this installation ran us around 25,000 for those of you who are number conscious. But remember, this was 2004, and we got a program at the state level that gave us some money back on that. So it was a good investment. So that happened to be Veterans Day. Seems like a great day to celebrate solar. In 2005, can you give me one more day there? 2005, we filled up the rest of the roof by putting solar thermal on the roof. And at that point, we put a $1,200 tank in the basement. It provides domestic hot water. I can take hot showers all summer long, thank you. And it also provides us some radiant heat to about 850 square foot of floors. But you'll also notice that in 2008, we did an awning as well, taking us up at that point to about 5 kilowatts on the roof or on the awning. And as you can see, we have some shade issues. Some of those trees are no longer with us. One more slide. In 2017, we got the bug one more time. We had a little bit of roof left. And that was a roof, our garage roof, primarily eastern facing, thank you. But it took us up at that point to a total of 10 kilowatts, which is what we're running with now. I've run out of roof. I can't add anything more. I'm looking at other options, but it means clear cutting the woods, and I'm not quite prepared to do
You
that.
could do an awning over that little doorway on the garage.
We could, but across from that awning happens to be some trees we haven't quite yet ready to give up, but we're thinking about it. We do think about these things. And so we did do one more thing, and in 21, we added a backup battery rather than putting in a gas whole house generator. It had its first test last year in January. At the end of January, we had a nice little storm, which meant my February production numbers for solar really sucked because we had snow on the panels for about a week. So you begin to obsess about those things. You do look at, how am I producing? How am I producing? So that's kind of where we are right now. One more slide, David. I wanted to throw some numbers at you just to give you an idea. So we went back in October, we participated in the solar tour. I threw some numbers together for the people who came out on an incredibly wet day to look at solar, which shows people who have really gotten the bug. And so we have produced across those three systems over 100,000 kilowatts. We feel really good about that. And when we look at the last 5 years, which is when we were at hit our 10 kilowatt, we find that we are about 96% self-reliant. We also still participate in the SREC program. We have some contracts that have not yet expired. Those are generating about $1,100 to $1,200 a year in income, which we like. And so with this number in mind, with our self-reliance in mind, we decided to embark on a new experiment this winter, which was, can we heat the house with heat pumps? We have a gas boiler. Normally we use that for the winter. This winter we decided to be a little bit daring and say, can we do it? We didn't know it was going to be a mild winter. We're glad that it is. We've been pretty satisfied with it. We've had about a 50 to 60% reduction in our gas usage. We're using gas as the backup system because it is Massachusetts, the lights do go out. And we've had a corresponding, not surprisingly, 50% increase in our kilowatt consumption. That's a little bit very sobering. I'm used to seeing low numbers. When I get my bill, I don't look at the total of the price. I look at my kilowatt consumption. Did I have to buy 1,000 kilowatts? Did I have to buy 700 kilowatts? And I'm still wrapping my head around seeing those numbers go up by 50%. However, now that we're into March, I have expectations that we will probably be about zero by the end of the month, simply because March tends to be a fairly productive month. Last year, we produced 900 kilowatts in the month of March, and that should hopefully carry us through. Yes, sir.
Do you have an electric car?
I do not. I have an 8-year-old Prius hybrid. When I look at the investment I've made on my roof, every one of those represents a car I didn't buy. We tend to hang on to our cars for a long time. So, you know, my car's 8 years old, my husband's car's 7 years old, we both drive hybrids. It's very likely my next vehicle will be all electric, but I don't know how much space I have left in my panel. That's one thing I have to think about. I have some toys in the house that, you know, I like to run. We run a fish pond, so there's a pump that has to run. We also had to put in a mitigation system for radon gas. So we're running a fan constantly to exhaust radon gas from underneath our basement. That's 150 watts an hour, 24/7. So, you know, things like that, which pushed up my consumption. I used to say we averaged about 650 kilowatts a month to run the house year in, year out. That number's been pushing up more as the toys have been added. The radon gas was a biggie, but that had to be done. It absolutely had to be done for our own health. Yes, sir.
Does the battery get used in the evening, or are you drawing off the grid in the evening?
We're drawing off the grid in the evening. We could set the battery up to do it that way, but we chose to use it primarily as a backup. And we are in a program with Eversource that especially during the summer when they have peak consumption, they have a right through a contract to draw on our battery for extra power. They can take it down at least 5 kilowatts or more. They can probably take it down to about 2.5 kilowatts, as long as they don't do it during an emergency, only if I need the battery. We have not yet had an opportunity to sell them those kilowatts, but it's a very, very nice price if ever we have to. I mean, it's like, I want to say $500 a kilowatt. I mean, it's an extraordinary program. I don't know that we'll actually ever see any money on it.
It was hard to tell from your picture, how large is that battery?
It's about 12 kilowatts.
No, I mean in size.
Oh, in size, well, it was really hard to get far enough away from it. It stands about 6 feet tall, and it's probably 2.5 feet deep. So yeah, that's my ceiling of my basement. So that's.
How many batteries are in that system?
Oh Lord, I have no idea. In terms of it.
That's what he wants to know.
That's what he wants to know. Oh, I'd have to open the door and count them in terms of how many are in it. It's a Sonnen battery. It was done by the installer who did our first system. We've been very pleased with it. And I see a question from someone I know.
Well, actually, I think it's a 7.5 with expandability to it, so we can handle it for storage.
Yeah, I think he was asking more about the structure. And I apologize for not having that. Yes, sir.
One of my neighbors complained about the idea of adding a battery in the house because he's read about batteries that explode. And I didn't have a good answer for him. I have not been able to find any examples of that on the web. Does any of the experts have any opinion about that?
I mean, I have no idea. We've dealt with other things. I've got a laptop battery that I think is about to explode, so I'm thinking I might have to do something about that. I know lithium batteries, there's always a risk, which is why airlines don't like you to have lithium batteries in your checked luggage. I've dealt with other things, critter guards, I'm more worried about the squirrels underneath my solar panels, frankly, than I am about the battery sitting in my basement. I've got a gas boiler sitting in my basement. I mean, there are so many things I could worry about, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to try and live my life.
I was interested in the market, but it isn't bothering me, but I don't know where it's coming from.
I mean, I don't know.
You have to pull a permit for the battery system.
Yeah, because we put about 30% of the house is, I mean, we went through the exercise that Megan talked about. What is it that we need to live with and live without in the event of a power outage? And we drew up that list of what the essentials were, which meant putting in a sub panel. Everything that was on that essentials list was moved to the sub panel, and the battery is what supports that sub panel. And then the rest of the house sits on the other panel. All of that required a licensed electrician, which fortunately our installer had. Well, and that gentleman spent an awful lot of hours in my basement sorting out electrical issues that had accumulated over 30 years of remodeling and extensions and this, that, and the other. Yes, sir.
Can you share the name of your installer?
Well, for the battery, we used a gentleman his name is Tom Weinman. It's Clean Energy Design. He was the initial installer for our initial, he's also the one who did our solar thermal. And to be fair, the other installers that we have used are E2 Solar.
Sure.
In both cases, we've been very happy with them. And I know there's someone else.
Yeah. Oh.
So I want to.
And that's his presentation, actually. Accidentally got it up there. Bob?
Excuse me.
Why don't we start on slide 4?
Really? Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bob Cronin. I have a different story from Ann. Thank you for coming, and thank you to FalCAN for inviting me to share my solar story, and to you in advance for staying so long.
Slide 4. 1, 2. You don't want to go through these?
I don't think there's time.
3, 4. The hers is important, though, isn't it?
Right.
That one there?
When you build in Massachusetts, either a new home or a significant renovation, you have to have a HERS rating, where they specialists evaluate the projected energy consumption of your new home or renovation. And they project it in advance, and then also after the home is built or renovated, they do a final evaluation. And a low score is good. 100 represents, if a new home, I believe, that was built to like 2006 standards, has a score of 100. And then the state keeps lowering the target for new homes and renovations. And so when the experts looked at our house on paper before any construction took place, they said, oh, you're gonna get a pretty good score of 49. And a 0, by the way, is what they call a net zero home, because it uses no energy on a net basis, on an annualized basis. So we can go to the next slide. So the experts also looked at our plans on paper and asked some questions, because we were replacing a 1948 uninsulated 750 square foot home with a much larger home. We failed the downsizing test in our retirement, and it was a seasonal home before. And so it was more difficult to estimate our electrical usage because our prior usage was totally irrelevant. But they came up with an estimate of a little over 15,000 kilowatt hours for a year. And the HERS rating was 49, which was pretty good without solar. And with the solar that we were envisioning, they said it'll be about an 8. And when the home was finally built, our final HERS rating came in at a 4, partly because we did some of those electrification things that Megan talked about. We put in a heat pump dryer, we had an electric induction stove, we had an electric fireplace, so there was no chimney or venting for the fireplace. And they also had a neat statistic at the bottom here. They estimated that our carbon footprint for the home would be 0.6 tons of carbon per year, and that was 99% below the average home in Massachusetts, 9.7 tons per year. So next slide. This is the statistics about our solar array, rather large. As I said, we failed the downsizing test. Our array was 12.24 kilowatts, which was comprised of 34 Solaria panels, each with a DC rating of 360 kilowatts. It's attached to our roof, as you'll see in a minute. We had microinverters that had a rating of 290 kilowatts on an AC basis. We could have used inverters with a higher AC rating, but we chose not to, so that we could stay below the net metering cap of 10 kilowatts. Megan mentioned that if you overproduce, in months where you overproduce, you may not get full credit for that overproduction. But at least when we finished our home in 2019, if we stayed below that 10 kilowatt net metering cap, we got full credit, 100% credit from Eversource in the months that we overproduce in the summertime, and in the winter when we underproduce, then we can draw on that credit that we built up during other times of the year. We also chose, since our house faces south on the street side, we wanted to have our solar panels look aesthetically pleasing as possible. So we chose solid black ones so they don't have a little grid pattern in them. Next slide, please. We thought we got a great warranty. Megan mentioned the long life of these panels, 25 years, and they're guaranteed to produce at 90% of the original output. At year 25, the inverters have the 25-year warranty she mentioned. And our installer, at least in the summary that he has in his proposal, I didn't read the detailed contract lately, but they claim that they're going to cover all the labor and materials for 20 years. It sounds great. But do check what your different installer candidates are offering you, because there may be some differences there too. Next slide, please. So this is our house without the solar panels. So we chose sort of a dark charcoal gray roof. Next slide, please. And there you can see we have 4 arrays. We have 10 panels high up on our garage roof, 7 panels here. On the main roof, there are 14 panels high up. And then far to the east, as to your right, there are 3 more panels. And that got us to 34 panels, which is just below the 10 kilowatt net metering cap. So going into this, we thought we wouldn't cover all of our electric needs, especially after we get the electric car that will replace our 2007 Prius, our only car. But we thought we'd come pretty close, and it didn't make sense to us to go over the 10 kilowatt metering cap and then kind of lose out on 40% of our overproduction. Next slide, please. This is a different lighting, so it's easier to see the panels. We thought they looked pretty good and better than they would if they had a little visible grid pattern in them. Next slide, please. So here are some of our results in terms of production. The solar installer estimated that we produce almost 15,000 kilowatt hours per year, but our actual production is about 10% higher than that, which actually doesn't surprise us that much, because if you want to be a smart installer, you want to kind of not overpromise what they're going to deliver. But that was still good news. The HERS rater had said that, we might consume 15,300 kilowatt hours per year, but actually, and I didn't have time to check all the years, but I think it's generally true that we've been under, our usage is significantly less, 13% less than what they had predicted. So that's great. That means we're actually producing every year on an annual basis more electricity than we're using, and we're building up a nice credit that we can draw upon after we get that electric car, and then we still left over, we can donate it to a friend or a nonprofit. Next slide, please. You get this cool app, and probably has this too. You can get obsessed looking at it. Oh, yeah. This shows March 1st. It's that nice, the blue bars shows every 15 minutes how much kilowatt, how many watts are being generated by the system. You can show other things overlaid here. This was the day before, which was the day of the big snowstorm, lower production. The screenshot on the left, on your right, is the year 2021, and it's a summary by month of how much electricity the 4 solar arrays generated in total. Next slide, please. Okay, so our system had an installed cost of almost $40,000. And as Megan said, it's just based on the size times a price per watt. And so ours was 12,240 watts times 325 per watt. That's almost $40,000. But almost very quickly, you get back the 30% tax credit, federal tax credit, and the Massachusetts tax credit. So our net installed cost was just under $27,000, still a lot of money. Next slide, please. But you get this huge savings in electricity. There you can see our savings by year, 2019 being a partial year. But for the, through 2022, we had saved $14,000, or almost $14,500. And the great thing about this is, as the price of electricity goes up, so is the value of the electricity that you're generating. So, I hear all the news about electricity rates going up, but I'm pretty much insulated from that because of the solar panels. What they're doing is their value is going up too. And this year it's going to be even more impressive. If the electrical rates stay the same as they are in the first half, in the second half, that value of the electricity that we get this year will be, more than $6,000. Next slide, please. Megan said that the programs keep changing, and that's certainly true for the SMART program too. We were in the first block of the SMART program in 2019, which meant that Eversource is paying us 14 cents per kilowatt hour, which is obviously far more than Megan mentioned is available now. But so far, that's generated almost $8,000 in monthly payments to us for that period. Next slide, please. So the installers, when they propose your system, they'll propose this payback analysis as well, which is a combination of your electrical savings plus whatever income you're getting from the utility on a monthly basis. And back in 2019, when I think they were using a rate of 22 cents per kilowatt hour, they said, you know, you're probably going to pay off the system in just under 5 years. But in our case, because we're producing more than the original estimate, and because electricity rates have gone up, you know, we're going to very likely pay it back in just under 4 years by my calculations. Plus, once it's paid off, you know, we're going to get those electrical savings for many years to come, and the smart income in our case is going to be paid out over a total of 10 years. And I think that might be the last slide. Next slide, please. So we've been super happy. It was one of the easiest, smartest, no regrets decisions we've ever made, and we feel good about doing our little bit for combating climate change, especially since we failed that downsizing test. So,
we'll see.
Any questions for me? You, sir?
In the proposals that you received, did you look at manufacturers of panels and the installation?
We did. We got estimates from 3 different installers, and the one we chose had basically 3 panels, but only 2 of which they were kind of emphasizing. And we were deciding between the, I forget the name of the American-made panel.
SunPower?
SunPower, which make great panels, but they were more expensive, and they also, you had to use their inverter with the panels, and we couldn't get as much production out of them because they had more efficient inverters that were going to put us over the net metering cap. So we were left with Solaria, and we liked the look of and Solaria and SunPower also had, I think they might have been the only panels at the time that had the solid black look we wanted for aesthetic reasons. But we didn't really do it. We trusted our solar installers to kind of recommend high performing panels. So it was kind of a clear cut decision for our needs to go with the Solaria one.
In part, I asked that question because the solar panel that we had, once it was examined, we found that molds had sheared, wind had blown, was affecting it. So installation is important as well.
I'm sure that's true, and we live fairly close to the ocean, so we get some very high winds, higher than probably most Falmouth residents. And so far, and installers seem to be aware of that as well as the builder.
It's required by code.
Right. So we haven't noticed any concerns in that regard. Did you have a question also, sir?
I do. Did you add a battery to this system?
No, we did not, or we did not have a battery. The only gas that we have in the home is for our on-demand hot water heater. And at the time, we were advised against getting a electric hot water heater. And then we also have a standby backup gas generator because there is gas on the street. The solar batteries at the time even the solar company didn't recommend them. It's just so much more expensive. And if you have an extended power outage, they're only going to have kind of a limited amount of time that they're going to provide power to the house. So we back up our essential circuits. We don't back up the whole house. Thank you.
I have a little question to that. So that was back in 2019. Has there been any significant advancement in the technology for battery backups? Maybe Megan has an answer on that.
I don't know the answer to that question. I hear that things keep getting better. And, you know, at some point, if I discover that, oh, it'd be good to have a battery too, in addition to, or instead of the gas, I might consider that down the road, but I'm really not the person to try to answer that.
I can address a little bit of that, I think. I waited a couple of years to get my whole solar system because of the issue of the batteries really not being able to do the thing that you really want them to do, which is to operate the panels when the power goes down as a freestanding system. So that's the major advantage now, is that nobody's mentioned, but when the grid goes down, your panels go down.
Correct.
So because they need the syncing signal from the phase sync from the grid. So the battery provides that. That's now a standard kind of feature on the newer batteries. And so if you are interested in having your panels operate, you can continue to have them operate. You can do the same thing, I gather, with a gas-powered generator if it's properly wired. But you need something to provide that signal to make the panels still operate.
Yeah, that's true. When I discovered that in 2019, that, oh, the solar panels aren't going to work when we've lost our power, that was disappointing to learn in school. I'm glad to hear that technology's advanced to take advantage of that, capturing that power when the grid is off.
We have some on the chat, don't we?
Yeah, right now we're about a half an hour longer than we've had the room reserved for. I presume we can probably keep going.
I don't see anybody outside.
Megan, are you willing to stay around for?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So then we can I'll just ask these questions from the chat if you want to get up there. But yeah, okay. So.
Next one.
Thank you, everybody who.
Oh, okay. People are leaving. Fine.
Appreciate you coming.
Those who want to stay for the questions, please stay.
And if anyone came in without pre-registering and didn't have a chance to sign our sign-in sheet, there's a sheet on the table there. Thank you.
Hi. Good job. I have a quick question. We're going to be putting a garage in. It's going to be oriented correctly. My house is under the trees. And even the batteries. Do you think the state reimbursements or anything like that, or federal policies will change?
Yeah.
If I build this in May versus wait until fall, is there any, probably no reason to wait with Healy?
I wouldn't wait, because I would think that everything would sort of be grandfathered in 23. That's my thought.
Okay, all right, good. Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I'm Peter Falmouth, and you spoke to her on the phone the other day. Just wanted to say hello.
Oh yeah, nice to meet you.
And I'm interested in the roof. We had our roof replaced this last year, specifically to put in solar power.
Yes.
But the people told us at the time.
I don't think anybody's sticking around.
Well, except the people that have the chat questions.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to save the chat, and then I'll send out the. And she may answer some now with the few people who are here, but I'll send out the chat answers from her in an email.
Tax credit for solar. And see what it says.
You want to tell the folks online that that's what we're doing?
Okay.
Thank you very much for this great presentation.
So can people online hear us? Ken, can you hear us still?
Yep, I can still hear you.
So presumably everybody else online can hear us. I think what we're going to do is save the chat and send it to Megan and the other two speakers and get the answers back to you, and we'll mail them out to everybody else that's registered for the event. So I think I'll just close the meeting now.
Yeah. Boy, that was great. Tell Megan, great job. You too, David. That was really good.
Okay, stop recording.